So hopefully you can see what we're doing here for the power supply heatsink assembly. We've put pins in to the heatsink paddle. I'm calling them paddles. This is the heat collector that's going to collect the heat into the main heatsink. So we've pinned it to keep the board located, because what potentially could happen here is if the board slides one way or the other, the screws that hold the collectors can potentially, we'll get rid of the washer here. The screws that connect to the collector could potentially shift around and make contact to the paddle, which will be grounded. And the collector will be at full potential. So you're going from unregulated full current from the power supply, 40, maybe 50, surge current maybe 65 amps, from the unregulated source into ground, potentially blowing up the rectifier, the tap select, at least blowing fuses, doing a lot of damage, potentially destroying the paddles, completely destroying the paddles. The arc event would completely destroy the paddles. So we want pins to locate the centers so that there's no movement here. We're also going to want to keep the board centered when we do our transfers, because we have to transfer the center holes for the pin sockets, and we have to transfer the center holes for the screws. So we want to make sure that the board's not going anywhere. That's what the pins are for. That should all make perfect sense here. There's a wide margin here because what we're going to do is we're going to create a large collector paddle on this side. And what we'll do is we'll put connection points on both 2 and 1 so that either a copper strap can bolt over or a series of straps can make power connections from 1 to 2. And then the power connection will be handled on one board, and the hope is sufficiently low resistance will be here after plating. Of course, we're going to do some plating to it. So hopefully there'll be sufficiently low resistance here that the current flowing in both 1 and 2 will be equal. Now that probably won't be the case. We'll probably have 26 amps here and 24 amps here because of the loss through the jumper. But the hope is that the current will be normalized to a greater extent, and that there won't be too much uneven current density between the two assemblies, because the majority of our power connections will go to the one assembly and then out. Whichever, it doesn't matter whichever is going to be the main power connection. We'll make connections available to either so that that decision can be made upon assembly. So the collector, these will form a collector paddle up top, and then the emitter paddle will be along the bottom, and then the base paddle will be up the middle. And that way the emitters can connect to the resistor to the paddle and will etch around the screw. And we may even use either a Kapton washer or a nylon washer to avoid making contact. So that we have to see. We'll probably use mil-spec washers too, because, come on, focus, man. We'll probably use mil-spec washers because they have a smaller footprint than your average flat washer. And it's almost that size. So relieving the copper around that is not a big deal. We'll have to see. I'm not sure yet. I haven't planned that far ahead. But the emitter should have a sufficient paddle. It's a 1/2 inch wide, and then we can go around and we can make it really beefy, because all the base needs to do is come in between here. So the emitter will have plenty of room for a big copper trace. So that should be okay. And each emitter is only going to be handling 3 amps max. So the current here is not a big thing, but the collective current will be a big deal. So we'll have to see how that goes. But the boards are in, just held on by the pin, just like that. It's very cute. See, just like that. Pretty basic. And then the wires will come out this way. And we've got our mounting holes. And when we go to mount this into the case, we'll have to mount this first. And then these will have to come in like that and then bolt in, because the cases you can't drop this into a case this way. The transistor packages will be too proud of the surface for that to happen. So the heatsink will have to be bolted in first, and then heat compound or a sill pad, and then the assembly will have to be bolted together. So that's a lot of work, but it's getting there. I can't wait to put transistors in it. That's going to be neat.